Hey everyone, after finishing Bravely Default for a second time, one in the 3DS and now in the Switch 2, let's check the usual topics, the story, gameplay, graphics and music. Without further ado, let's begin. Bravely Default begins with some cinematics, presenting our main characters in this journey. Agnes Oblige, the Vestal of Wind, asking for help. Tis Arrior, a common person whose village was destroyed by a chasm. Ringabel, a charismatic dude who suffers from amnesia, and Idea, daughter from the Grand Marshal of Eternia. Along this tale, this protagonist will have as objective to awaken the 4 crystals around this planet, as somehow they were engulfed in darkness, and because of that, Norende, this village was devoured by the chasm. Unfortunately, problems do not end there, as the world is pretty much decaying, as the ocean water is putrid, in some regions the wind stopped blowing, and similar things happen all around the globe. Of course, as our group advances, they will find some antagonists who want to stop the Vestal of Wind from performing this ritual to awaken the 4 crystals. These antagonists add another interesting layer to the journey, as they bring different problems. For example, excessive prices for water, twisted ideas about fashion, lunatics who believe that the end justifies the means, and whatnot. So, through the journey, this group will slowly liberate each region from the Tyranno's claws and restore the world as Agnes awakens the crystals to their former glory. Along the way, the player will understand a bit more the real motives from each party member, particularly in these, let's say, heart-to-heart conversations, or party discussions. While some of them can be a bit trivial, it is true that sometimes they share interesting pieces of a story that are like, oh, that's why this character does XYZ thing. For the most part, they are interesting. In general, I believe it is a really good story, as it has a quite rich lore, interesting characters, and plenty of funny moments. It is fair to say that it doesn't keep everything as a surprise. If you read between lines here and there, you will quickly catch what's going on, as it teases those ideas all over the place, and it isn't subtle at all. It is like, hey player, be teased with this idea, look at it! My main complaint about this journey isn't as unoriginal as the classic comment regarding a particular narrative moment, let's call it that way. If you have played the game, you know what I'm talking about. Well, my complaint comes with the way some characters were developed, particularly Agnes and Tis. If you ask me, I believe Ringabel takes the cherry. Then I will say Ideally has interesting interactions here and there, plus some lore in between because of reasons, let's say it like that. And she even appeared in 2 more games. Well, not sure about one because she is Ideally Oblige, but well, the thing is that between Agnes and Tis, I didn't feel a noticeable change. Sure, there are some chapters where they take a bit the lead regarding narrative elements, but rather than enjoying them, I am like, oh man, this pair can be really annoying. But that is just my opinion. In any case, retaking the idea about that repetitive moment, depending how you tackle certain parts of the game, I will say that they can be equally interesting or turn the game a bit stagnant. On this front, I do recommend to not rush everything in one go, but keep some activities waiting. That way you can balance things between narrative and gameplay. Aside from that hiccup, I like what is presented. Once again, I believe there is a rich lore, sad moments, plenty of funny ones, and interesting progression. But yes, I also believe there are some moments that drag the narrative as they ask you to go all over the place to trigger a conversation. But in general, they are passable. I will give it an 8.5. In the gameplay section, I wanna check the general flow of the game, customization, and bosses. I could say that this game follows the classic idea of JRPGs. Almost right away you are going to have a full party, within the first 5 hours of gameplay. After that, it's going to be all about moving around the world, sometimes exploring caves, sometimes exploring buildings or enemy strongholds, traversing the seas and so on. In general, I could say that the level of exploration presented in this game is quite entertaining, even within seemingly simple dungeons, where oftentimes there will be a hidden chest. The best you can do if you want to open all of them is to allocate this freelancer skill, so you can get an idea of the number of chests per area, and oftentimes you will need to pass through invisible walls. As far as I remember, all of them are on the lower parts of the screen, where you cannot see something in particular. And also that is the main idea for a hidden boss, so just keep it in mind. Through these areas you will have plenty of random encounters. I could say that the 100% ratio is rather high, and depending how you decide to explore, it may turn rather complicated. having to leave and enter multiple times some dungeons. But this is completely up to you, because you can increase or decrease this rate by 200% or 50%. If you ask me, I always train at the very beginning of the dungeon, having the chance to enter and leave, to cure my characters if needed. Or, in case I wanted to move quickly, I usually set it to 50% and rush until finding the explorer, who will always give you the option to rest. He's a bit more expensive, but you can gather the money really fast. Now, I would argue that this game isn't particularly grindy, at least in comparison to other old school RPGs, but some extra levels may help you in the long run. This is where the system Brave and Default comes into play. Depending how you strategize, you can pull 4 attacks right away, but you will have to wait 3 turns to move once again, or you can default and gather 1 extra move without penalties. Of course, this default idea works as defending. In this case, some setups ask you to burn turns as fast as possible, while others need to be much more moderate with this, at least against specific bosses or enemies. Well, the deal in normal battles is to finish them in 1 turn. That way you will increase the experience in 10, 20 and 50%. If you can finish the combat without receiving damage, you can gather extra job points to get more skills and level up your jobs, because they have separate levels. And if you beat every enemy with your last move, you get extra money. From these options, I would argue that the job points and experience are the most important ones. You don't really need that much money in this game, but well, that is what I recommend. And if you can equip an item to increase your chances to attack first and reduce the enemy chances, that is really good. Because as you advance, some enemies may be a bit harsh, having the chance to beat your whole group in 1 turn. That is why I recommend to farm once you find the explorer. This way you can rest and save whenever you need, plus keeping the 50% bonus for experience. Now you will have to rinse and repeat this process several times. If properly done, you can increase plenty of levels in matter of, let's say, 30 minutes or 1 hour, depending if you also want to increase your job levels. But I do recommend to stick with 1 job at first, till almost the 4th crystal region. In general, the easiest place to farm are these 2 dungeons, because you can find almost pure skeletons in the first floor, so fire attacks do the trick. And the very last temple, once the game tries to bore the heck out of you, so just spam ice attacks, but be careful with the male dragons, they are annoying as heck. In summary, that is the general flow of the game. What really matters is what you set as your main job, secondary job and support skills. Your chosen job is the one that will get the points after battle, while the secondary job just gives you a main passive skill and every active skill, or those with yellow color. The ones in blue have to be set here, just be careful, every passive skill has a different cost, going from 1 to 3, and by setting all of these things is that you can run specific formations. Needless to say that you will have to change strategies as you advance, so it is always good to have a kind of idea in mind, you know, a proper balance between damage, defense, buffing, debuffing and healing. What's interesting is that some enemies will most likely push you to bring creative setups. At first they won't ask you for something impossible, but later they can turn into hard challenges. So give yourself some time to check every single skill as you unlock classes, and try to make a plan as you advance. There are plenty of skills and jobs, so it will take some time to refine some builds. Now, in all honesty, I do recommend to not check guides, as that is the entertaining part of the game, because you won't be able to brute force your way. The whole key to beat Bravely Default lies in these skills and a proper setup for your whole squad. Personally, I would say it is slightly complex, because bosses in this game do not behave as your average turn-based RPG. What works at the beginning of the fight may turn really different as you reduce the enemy HP, and sometimes there are multiple bosses on the field, so just keep an eye for as many options as you can, as sometimes if you beat a specific enemy, they may start to use 4 moves in 1 turn, or really powerful attacks every single turn. And that is a cool detail, because the game forces you to be creative. If your strategy lacks in some areas, most likely they will bully you really hard. In any case, what I love the most is that plenty of bosses have, let's say, little gimmicks. Sometimes they buff themselves every single turn, sometimes they won't receive any damage until a specific condition is achieved, Sometimes they have really high defense or resistance, and that is what I said, that one specific strategy may not help the whole journey. Perhaps my only complaint here is that some of them feel as sponges of HP if you do not have a proper damage dealer, so they may take plenty of time to be beaten, and with that I mean up to 15-30 minutes in some cases. So every time you see that there is an explorer out of a room, change your exploration setup for plenty of damage, and beware that some, let's say, hidden bosses will most likely beat the S out of you real good. Just be patient and pay attention to what they do after each turn. With all of these details, to me Bravely Default is a really entertaining turn-based RPG with a rich world and interesting challenges left and right. It isn't a walk in the park, especially the first time you beat it, but I will give it a 9. In all honesty, it doesn't fall into a stagnant story until a specific point, but once you know what you're doing, you can finish that part really fast. Aside from that, there are plenty of challenges for you to enjoy. In the graphics section, I check glitches, game performance, aesthetics, and some other visual details. Right away I would say that the only funny thing about this game is that with some attacks and a specific number of enemies in the field, you will notice how the screen freezes for a bit. Since the 3DS I remember this part like that, but aside from this detail, there is nothing worth mentioning as it never closed, I didn't get stuck in a particular area or something like that. However, something to point out is that the game isn't completely HD remaster, if you let me put it that way. I know Square Enix isn't what it used to be some decades ago, but they pretty much brought the 3DS game as it is. And yes, there are some slight changes here and there with some sprites, but what's funny is that in the original release, for some reason, some characters do not move their mouths in really specific conversations. Now, I won't show them as they are pretty much big spoilers, but they kept it that way, so it feels a bit cheap, like, oh come on, you could have worked that, considering that those are important moments. I mean, it isn't like the party conversations. Another thing to point out is that the gallery thrown into this game left a lot to be desired. In all honesty, I don't mind the 3D modeling, but I would have liked to see other creative ideas, as how this game took this shape after multiple iterations and so on. But oh well, what can I say? As for the general aesthetics, I will say that I really like what the game offers. I believe there is a lot of amazing areas. It is true that some are kept in just one single room, but even those places show memorable ideas, or at least up to this day since I played it in the 3DS, I remember plenty of them. And now that I took the time to check sketches, models, environments, little effects and so on, to me, it is a really beautiful game. My main complaint comes with the enemies, because they repeated models like there's no tomorrow, diminishing the experience to a certain degree, as they are part of the main idea of the game. On this front, the ones I liked were the bosses. In general, I believe they had creative designs. Sure, some are more like a meme, but putting things on the table between funny modeling and every idea, I can say without a doubt that I like the artistic execution of this game. Now, as a curious thing, Bravely Default didn't start as Bravely Default, but as Final Fantasy. The deal is that Final Fantasy and the 4 Heroes of Light was kind of obscure, or at least this is a game you don't hear many people talk about. I knew about it, but I do not play Final Fantasy games since a lot of years. And well, it is really easy to notice that these games had similar ideas. Nothing wrong with that. This is just a look back in time. And chances are that if you explore things in Bravely Default, you found the bosses from this game. Yes sir, these motherfuckers! Well, I didn't know they were part of that game, but I wanted to show you this because I believe it was a cool detail. I will give the graphics an 8.5. It is true, there are some hiccups left and right regarding creative ideas, particularly with common mobs as they are pretty much the same, plus the ice attack while farming experience. But it is also true that this game is filled with beautiful details all over the place. And last but not least, the music. This OST was written, composed and arranged by Rebo, Japanese who mainly focuses on symphonic rock. And through the game I believe it is easy to hear how fantastic this OST sounds. I will say that since the very beginning you will notice that Galdisla has something magical, Once you start to move around the open world, the experience improves with that upbeat theme with plenty of airy instruments, tubular bells and strings, and through the whole journey you will hear plenty of amazing compositions. Personally, I love the battle themes, like That Person Named Is, Wicked Battle, Flight, Fight to the End, particularly Val. It is a chaotic and extraordinary theme, but you will hear that in Bravely Second much more in comparison to this game. And of course, the one that takes the cherry is The Serpent That Devours the Horizon. All of them combine perfectly well a classic composition, but with a big dash of rock or metal, but they do not feel like a copy from one another, which is quite cool. In some they focus on violins, in others combination between piano and guitars. Some others change styles in a radical way, throwing something more like an orchestra, so you will listen plenty of instruments. Yes, it is true that some compositions are quite short, looping kinda constantly. Surprisingly, Bravely Default has like over 40 tracks, going for around 2 hours and a half. In any case, I'm sure that most of you know that Rebo threw a live concert with the most iconic themes from the game. So if you haven't checked it out, go and do it. It is superb. For me, this soundtrack is a 10. It is simply beautiful. Bravely Default final score is a 9. If for some reason you didn't have the chance to play the original release back in the day, this is a good moment to give this game a try. Yup, I definitely recommend it, as it has plenty of creative ideas and amazing moments, enjoyable cast of characters, a rich world which is worth exploring, and superb OST. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.